We're going to be reading Chapter 12, Strawberry's Adventure, from The Magician's Nephew by C.S. Lewis. Chapter 12. Dickory kept his mouth very tight shut. He had been growing more and more uncomfortable. He hoped that, whatever happened, he wouldn't blub or do anything ridiculous. "Son of Adam," said Aslan, "are you ready to undo the wrong that you have done to my sweet country of Narnia on the very day of its birth?" "Well, I don't see what I can do," said Dickory. "You see, the Queen ran away and—" "I asked, are you ready?" said the Lion. "Yes," said Dickory. He had, for a second time, some wild idea of saying, "I'll try to help you if you promise to help my mother," but realized that, in time, that the Lion was not at all that sort of person. One could try to make bargains with, but when he said yes, he thought of Mother, and he thought of the great hopes he had had, and how they were all dying away, and a lump came in his throat, and tears in his eyes, and he blurted out, "But please, please, can't you give me something that will cure Mother?" Up until then, he had been looking at the Lion's great feet and huge claws on them. Now, in his despair, he looked up at his face, and what he saw in him surprised him as much as anything in his whole life. For the tawny face was bent down near his own. Wonder of wonders, great shining tears stood in the Lion's eyes. They were such big, bright tears compared with Dickory's own that for a moment he felt as if the Lion must really be sorrier about his mother than he was himself. my son," said Aslan. "Aslan, I know, grief is great. Only you and I in this land know that yet. Let us be good to one another. But I have come to think of hundreds of years in the life of Narnia. The witch whom you've brought into this world will come back to Narnia again, but it need not be yet. It is my wish to plant in Narnia a tree that she will not dare to approach, and that tree will protect Narnia from her for many years. So this land shall have a long, bright morning before any clouds over the sun. You must get me the seed from which that tree is to grow." "Yes, sir," said Dickory, but he didn't know how it was to be done, but he felt quite sure now that he would be able to do it. The Lion drew a deep breath, stooped its head even lower, and gave him a lion's kiss. At once Dickory felt this new strength and courage had gone into him. "Dear son," said Aslan, "I will tell you what you must do. Turn and look to the west, and tell me what you see." "I see terribly big mountains, Aslan," said Dickory. "I see this river coming down the cliffs in a waterfall, and beyond that cliff there are high green hills with forest, and beyond that there are higher ranges that look almost black. And then, far away, there are big snowy mountains all heaped together, like pictures of the Alps. And behind those there's nothing but sky." "You see well," said the Lion. "Now the land of Narnia ends where the waterfall comes down, and when you've reached the top of the cliffs, you will be out of Narnia and into the western wild. You must journey through those mountains till you find a great green valley with a blue lake in it, walled round by mountains of ice. At the end of the lake there is a steep green hill. On the top of that hill there is a garden. In the center of that garden is a tree. Pluck an apple from that tree and bring it back to me." "Yes, sir," said Dickory again. He hadn't the least idea of how he was going to climb the cliff, find his way among all the mountains, but he didn't like to say that for fear it would sound like making excuses. But he did say, "I hope, Aslan, you're not in a hurry. I shan't be able to get there and back very quickly." "Little son of Adam, you shall have help," said Aslan, and then he turned to the horse, who had been standing quietly beside them all this time, swishing his tail and keeping the flies off, listening with his head on one side as if the conversation were a little too difficult to understand. I don't know why I'm yawning. "My dear," said Aslan to the horse, "would you like to be a winged horse?" You should have seen how the horse shook his mane, and how its nostrils widened, and its little tap it gave to the ground with one back hoof. Clearly it would very much like to be a winged horse. But it only said, "If you wish, Aslan, if you really mean, I don't know why it should be me. I'm not a very clever horse." "Be winged, be father of all flying horses," roared Aslan in a voice that shook the ground. "Your name is Fledge." The The horse shied, just as it might have shied in the old miserable days when it pulled a hansom. Then it roared. It strained its neck back as if there were a fly biting its shoulders, and it wanted to scratch them. And then, just as the beast had burst out of the earth, there burst out from the shoulders. Ugh, my camera's not working. There burst out from its shoulders, the shoulders of Fledge, wings that spread and grew, larger than eagles, larger than swans, larger than the angels' wings in church windows. The feathers shone chestnut color and copper color, and he gave a sweep with them and leaped into the air, 20 feet above Aslan and Diggory. He snorted, neighed, and curveted. Then, after circling once around them, he dropped to the earth on all four hooves together, looking awkward and surprised, but extremely pleased. Is it good, Fledge? Is it good, Fledge? said Aslan. It is very good, Aslan, said Fledge. Will you carry this little son of Adam on your back to the valley mountain I spoke of? What? Now? At once? Said Strawberry, or Fledge, as we must now call him. Hurrah! Come on, little one. I've had things like you on my back before, long, long ago, when there were green fields and sugar. What are the two daughters of Eve whispering about? Said Aslan, turning very suddenly on Polly and the cabbie's wife, who had been in fact making friends. If you please, sir, said Queen Helen, for that is what Nellie the cabman's wife now was. I think that the little girl would love to go too, if it were no trouble. What does Fledge say about that? Asked the Lion. Oh, I don't mind too, not when they're little ones, said Fledge. But I hope that elephant doesn't want to come as well. The elephant had no such wish, and the new king of Narnia helped both children up. That is, he gave Diggory a rough heave and set Polly up as gently and daintily on the horse's back as if she were made of china and might break. There they are, Strawberry, Fledge, I should say. This is a rum go. Do not fly too high, said Aslan. Do not try to go over the tops of the great ice mountains. Look for the valleys, the green places, and fly through them. There will always be a way through. And now, be gone with my blessing. Oh, Fledge, said Diggory, leaning forward to pat the horse's glossy neck. This is fun. Hold on to me tight, Polly. Next moment the country dropped away beneath them, whirled round as Fledge like a huge pigeon, circled once or twice before setting off on his own long westward flight. Looking down, Polly could hardly see the king and queen, and even Aslan itself, only a bright yellow spot on the green grass. Soon the wind was in their faces, and Fledge's wings settled down to a steady beat. Also, it's a bigger version, it's the cover. All Narnia, many colored with lawns and rocks and heather and different sorts of trees, lay spread out below them, the river winding through it like a ribbon of quicksilver. They could already see over the tops of the low hills which lay northward on their right. Beyond those hills, the great moorland sloped up and onto the horizon. On the left, mountains were much higher, and every now and then there was a gap when you could see between the steps of pine woods, a glimpse of the southern lands that lay beyond them, looking blue and far away. That'll be where Archenland is, said Polly. Yes, but look ahead, said Diggory. For now a great barrier of cliffs rose before them, and they were almost dazzled by the sunlight dancing on the great waterfall, by which the river roars and sparkles down into Narnia itself from the high western land in which it rises. They were flying so high already that the thunder of those falls could only be just heard as a small thin sound. But they were not yet high enough to fly over the top of the cliffs. We'll have to do a bit of zigzagging here, said Fledge. Hold Hold on tight." He began flying to and fro and getting higher at each turn. The air grew colder, and he heard the call of the eagles far below them. "I say, look back, look behind," said Polly. And there they could see the whole valley of Narnia stretched out to where, just before the eastern horizon, there was a gleam of the sea. And now they were so high that they could see tiny-looking, jagged mountains appearing beyond the northwest moors and the plains of what looked like sand in the far south. "I wish we had someone to tell us what all those places are," said Diggory. "I don't suppose they're anywhere yet," said Polly. "I mean, there's no one there, and nothing's happening. The world only began today." "No, but people will get there," said Diggory, "and then they'll have histories, you know." "Well, it's a jolly good thing they haven't now," said Polly, "because nobody can be made to learn it, battles and dates and all that rot." Now they were over the top of the cliffs, and in a few minutes the valley land of Narnia had sunk out of sight behind them. They were flying over a wild country of steep hills and dark forests, still following the course of the river. The really big mountains loomed ahead, but the sun was now in the travelers' eyes, and they couldn't see things very clearly in that direction, for the sun sank lower and lower till the western sky was all like one great furnace full of melted gold, and it set at last behind a jagged peak which stood up against the brightness as sharp and flat as if it were cut out of cardboard. "It is none too warm up here," said Polly, "and my wings are beginning to ache," said Fledge. "There's no sign of the valley with the lake in it, like what Aslan said. But what about coming down and looking out for a decent spot to spend the night in? We shan't reach that place tonight." "Yes, and surely about time for some supper," said Diggory. So Fledge came lower and lower, and as they came down nearer to the earth among the hills, the air grew warmer, and traveling so many hours with nothing to listen to but the beat of Fledge's wings, it was nice to hear the homely and earthly noises again. The chatter of the river on its stony bed, and the creaking of the trees in the light wind. A good warm smell of sun-baked earth and grass and flowers came up to them. At last Fledge alighted. Diggory rolled off and helped Polly to dismount. Both were glad to stretch their stiff legs. The valley in which they had come down was in the heart of the mountains, snowy heights, one of them looking rose-red in the reflection of the sunlight towered above them. "I am hungry," said Diggory. "Well, tuck in," said Fledge, taking a mouthful of grass. Then he raised his head, still chewing with bits of grass sticking out on each side of his mouth like whiskers, and said, "Come on, you two, don't be shy, there's plenty for all of us." "But we can't eat grass," said Diggory. Said Fledge, speaking with his mouth full. "Well, I don't know quite what you'll do then. Very good grass, too." Polly and Diggory stared at one another in dismay. "Well, I do think someone might have arranged about our meals," said Diggory. "I'm sure Aslan would have, if you asked him," said Fledge. "Wouldn't he know without being asked?" said Polly. "Oh, I've no doubt he would," said the horse, still with his mouth full. "But I've a sort of idea he likes to be asked." "But what on earth are we to do?" said Diggory. "I'm sure I don't know," said Fledge, "unless you try the grass. You might like it better than you think." "Oh, don't be silly," said Polly, stamping her foot. "Of course humans can't eat grass any more than you could eat a mutton chop." "For goodness sake," "don't talk about chops and things," said Diggory. "It only makes it worse." Diggory said that Polly had better take herself home by Ring and get something to eat there. He couldn't himself because he had promised to go straight on his message for Aslan, and if once he showed up again at home, anything might happen to prevent his getting back. But Polly said she wouldn't leave him, and Diggory said it was jolly decent of her. "I say," said Polly, "I've still got the remains of that bag of toffee in my jacket. It'll be better than nothing." "A lot better," said Diggory. "Be careful to get your hand into your pocket without touching your ring." This was a difficult and delicate job, but they managed it in the end. The little paper bag was very squishy and sticky when they finally got it out, and it was more of a quiet question of tearing the bag off the toffees than getting the toffees out of the bag. Some grown-ups, you know how fussy they can be about that sort of thing, would rather have gone without supper altogether than eaten those toffees. There were 9 of them all told, and it was Diggory who had the bright idea of eating 4 each and planting a 9th, for he said, "If the bar off the lamppost turned into a a little light tree. Well, why shouldn't these turn into a toffee tree? So they dibbled a little small hole in the turf and buried the piece of toffee. Then they ate the other pieces, making them last as long as they could. It was a poor meal. Even with all the paper, they couldn't help eating as well. When Fledge had quite finished his own excellent supper, he lay down. The children came and sat one on each side of him, leaning against his warm body. And when he had spread a wing over each of them, they were really quite snug. As the bright young stars of that new world came out, they talked about everything. How Diggory had hoped to get something for his mother, and how, instead of that, he had been sent away on this message, and how they had repeated to one another to know the signs by which they would know the places they were looking for. The blue lake, and the hill with the garden on top of it. The talk was just beginning to slow down when they got sleepy, when suddenly Polly sat up, wide awake, and said, "Hush!" Everyone listened as hard as they could. "Perhaps it was only the wind in the trees," said Diggory presently. "I'm not so sure," said Fledge. "Anyway, wait, there it goes again. By Aslan, it is something." The horse scrambled to its feet with a great noise and a great upheaval. The children were already on theirs. Fledge trotted to and fro, sniffing and whinnying. The children tiptoed this way and that, looking behind every bush and tree. They kept on thinking they saw things, and there was one time when Polly was perfectly certain she had seen a tall, dark figure gliding quickly away in a westerly direction. But they caught nothing in the end. Fledge lay down again, and the children re-snuggled, if that is the right word, under his wings, and they went to sleep at once. Fledge stayed awake much longer, moving his ears to and fro in the darkness, and sometimes giving a little shiver with his skin, as if the fly had lighted on him. But in the end, he too slept. Sorry. That's the end of the chapter. Where is Diggory going? And Polly. What is Strawberry's new name, and what happened to Strawberry? What did they plant in the ground? And who do you think they saw in the dark, the tall, dark figure? All right, I look forward to chapter 13 tomorrow.